Here is a little dress that I bought from a charity shop. It cost me £2.50 and I'm going to cut it up to make a pattern so I can make a new dress. It's quite a pretty little dress, but it's a bit tatty. It's got nice little sleeves and flat felled seams. The shoulder seam is dropped a little bit just down at the front, and the front neckline is bound, but it's a bit mucky. You can see it's got food stains on it, and the whole front of the dress buttons down right from the neck to the bottom of the skirt. So the first thing I'm going to do now is cut the skirt off, and I don't need to make a pattern piece for the skirt. All it is a big rectangle. So I have to make sure that I add enough to the rectangle so I have a seam allowance for the top, for the waist, and also a hem allowance for the bottom. Once I've cut off the skirt, I'm left with the bodice, and looking at the bodice, it's a bit wonky. You can see that one side of the bodice at the bottom, it's got a nice straight edge, whereas on the other side it slopes upwards. So I'm going to use the better side, the side with the straight edge, for my pattern piece. Also the back is a little bit wonky too, and I'm going to use the side that corresponds with the front piece. Now I'm going to cut the first piece of the bodice off, starting at the shoulder seam, from the neckline to the top of the shoulder. Then I'm going to cut down round the armhole and cut off the sleeve completely, and then cut up the side seam so I can cut off the front bodice piece. And here's the front piece that I'm going to draw around to make the pattern piece. Next I'm going to completely cut off the sleeve, and once that's off the bodice, I'm going to cut up the seam that goes on the underneath of the sleeve, and then I will be able to open out the sleeve to make a pattern piece. Here is the sleeve all opened out. It's going to be a very easy pattern piece to make, but first of all I'm going to take the front bodice piece and draw around it on a piece of plain white paper. And I've got a rough faint outline. It doesn't have to be exact at this stage. And I'm going to do the same with the sleeve piece. Draw around it on the piece of plain white paper, and again it's a bit uneven, but that doesn't matter yet. As for the back, I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to take a point from the middle of the neck and cut straight down it along the middle so that I have one half, and that half I'm going to use to make a pattern piece for the back. So now I can do the same thing, draw around the back piece on a piece of plain paper, and again you can see it's done quite faintly at this stage. But next I can draw round it with a bold outline. I'll use a ruler for the straight edge, and I'll make sure that the angle of the straight edge where it meets the neck is a right angle, and with the front I'll do the same, and I'll make sure that the two shoulder seams and the two side seams are exactly the same length. Now I'm going to start tracing the pattern. I'll show the back first. And what I need to do is add the seam allowances. I'm doing 5/8 of an inch for the shoulder seam, and around the sleeves and the side seam I'm doing 1/4 of an inch for the neck edge and an inch for the waist seam. The same for the front, but for the front I need to add an extra section so it can fold over where I'm going to put on the buttons and buttonholes. So I'm going to draw a line parallel to the side, 1.5 inches away from the edge, and then I'm going to fold it under and then draw the neckline again, tracing through the paper, and do the same again at the bottom, drawing around the bottom edge, so that when I fold it out I have an extra section which is going to be the part that folds under, which is where the buttonholes and the buttons will go. Now for the sleeve, which is quite easy. I'm going to trace that and add the seam allowances, 5/8 of an inch all the way around the top and the sides, and a little bit deeper for the hem at the bottom. I have to make sure that the two sides are the same length so it meets neatly for the seam, and also I'm going to fold it over and trim it just at the edges to make sure that both sides are exactly the same, that the piece is symmetrical. The fold line also I can use to mark the central dot at the very top of the sleeve so I can place the sleeve correctly. And here's the little dress that I've made. It's turned out quite nice, much prettier than the original from the charity shop. I put a little bit of trim around the sleeves and around the neck, and the pattern cost me £2.50, the price of the dress from the shop.